Well, welcome everyone to Satsang on a beautiful Sunday evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you happen to be. And for those of you in the U.S., happy Father's Day. I will actually be cutting Satsang a little bit short today. My son and family are coming to gather me up. We're going to a picnic at Green Lake on a rare sunny day in Seattle. So glad you're all here, as always. It's always a delight to commune with people who are interested in the truth, who want to know the truth of themselves, and won't settle for anything less. And therein lies a key distinction, that the true seeker is one that does put the knowledge of truth above all else. It becomes almost an obsession. Because what can compare to finding that which is unchanging, which is absolutely stable, which will never betray, will never let you down. I can't think of anything grander. The subject I chose to talk about today was thought is a cosmic event. We think of thought as a personal possession. My thoughts, right? We think of it as something that is that we have, that it has control over us, and we have and we try to get control over it. Matter of fact, most of the self-help techniques, especially the ones that revolve around manifestation and the like, are all about controlling thought. The many different forms of meditation, almost all the meditation in the U.S. and in the West, is this idea that somehow I'm going to make the mind stop. I'm going to force it to stop. Now, the underlying assumption there is that it is something that I have control over, that I created. Now, if you look at the whole human mechanism, absolutely nothing in this incredibly complex set of functions that make up a human body is under our control. It's under the control of our will or volition. The only thing that comes even close is our breath, which we can, for a certain period of time, influence it temporarily. We can't stop it. We can hold our breath, but eventually it'll go, okay, enough, idiot, and make you pass out and start breathing again. But somewhere along the line, we've gotten this idea that our thoughts are something that are created by us, owned by us, and can be controlled by us. And if you look carefully, really closely at it, you'll see that it's not true. That all of our best attempts, and I'm sure most everybody here has tried to stop thinking, right? All of those attempts have failed. Every single one. Well, why is that? Well, what if we don't actually have control over it? What if we have no more control over our thinking than we have over the digestion of food, or the pumping of blood, or the flowing of the various chemicals through the lymph nodes? When I use the term cosmic event, what I'm speaking of is that things that simply happen because of the nature of existence itself. Why does your stomach digest food? It's a cosmic event. It just does it. So when I'm talking about cosmic, I'm not just out there in the galaxies and the spinning of nebula and the like, creation of stars. I'm talking about every single event that takes place within the universe, the growing of hair or a leaf on a tree. All of these things we see as being just a functioning of life, except thought. Somehow we think thought is something else. But And so we cause ourselves an enormous amount of suffering by trying to do the impossible, namely, stop thinking, change thinking, influence thinking, getting in a conflict with it, getting in a war with our own thinking. And there's fewer things more intimate to us than our thinking. Right? I mean, it's a voice right here, right? It's not on the other side of the room. Right? So if we start to think about it as simply a cosmic event that's happening, and it took the particular shape, the particular shape that your thoughts, the thoughts that are occurring to you most closely, right? It took that shape according to the normal cosmic rules, in which case it was simply patterns of thought that formed in response to the environment in which they're in. You put a plant in a garden, and depending on the soil, the amount of moisture, the amount of sunlight it gets, it's going to grow really big or really small, or have a lot of fruit or have no fruit at all. It may go to seed, it may not go to seed. But it is this dynamic relationship between the essence itself, the thing itself, the seed, and the environment, and you can't separate the two. So what we love to think of as our thoughts are nothing other than conditioned patterns of thought that were conditioned by the environment in which they appeared, which is, your whole life has been nothing but that. But we have this idea that somehow that's a problem. Now, if I decide that it's a problem, guess what? It becomes a problem. I have started to interpret and judge thoughts based on my assumption as to what they should be like, what they should be doing. So what if I could just drop that and just watch them? Just watch the thoughts. Which means no relationship with them whatsoever. In the same way I would sit and watch a tree as it kind of dances in the wind, or watch a stream as it flows by, or a lake with people swimming in it. What if I was to put thought in that same category? Now, many of you here have heard that before. You've been around the spiritual block enough times that you've heard that, to just witness and just watch. But even that is difficult, because we are so habituated in this underlying assumption that somehow I'm supposed to control the matter, and that some thoughts are good, some thoughts are bad. I want this thought, I don't want this thought, that we find ourselves in a battle with them. A battle that we have created. This ability to be a pure witness is indeed a very advanced capacity. It means to witness something, to watch, to observe, without any preference as to what's happening, without any vested interest in the direction it goes in, how it turns out, without any judgment or criticism of what is being witnessed. Pure witnessing, which is really pure awareness. You're simply aware of it and adding nothing else to it. Now, what you'll find, interestingly enough, if you examine this for a bit, is that act of judging it, having preferences about it, assigning different values to it, having an interest in the way it goes, is also thought, is also part of the conditioning. So you witness even that, which, just look closely, you are witnessing it. But simply because we've been trained to do so, we have gotten engaged with the series of thoughts. We have become identified with them. We've identified ourselves in a particular position that creates a relationship with those thoughts. And now from that position, I judge them. You're good, you can come. You're bad, you go. And of course, that's the conflict. And with the underlying belief that somehow I can make them come and go, I've put myself in the position of inevitable suffering, because the truth is I can't make them come and go. I can only reestablish my relationship with them. I can only let go of them. That you can do. Consciousness doesn't need to control thoughts. It simply watches them. It has no vested interest in them. So it has no attachment to them going one way or the other. Imagine for a moment that everything that is happening in your life right now, just for the fun of it, pretend that you chose it. That you're absolutely okay with it. Like, oh, this is great. Yeah. That you have no issue with it, no disagreement, no argument with anything going on in yourself, in the world, in politics, in the economy, that you even chose it. Oh, I like that. Even invited it. Notice what that feels like. There's no conflict there. And the end of suffering is the end of conflict. When I no longer have an issue with what is happening, I am no longer pulling on it or pushing it away. I'm at peace. I have nothing, I have no enemies. There's no one, nothing and no one to struggle with. You didn't create thoughts. Not a one. You can verify this yourself. Just go look. Trace back a particular line of thought that you had to where it started. And you'll find that it was just a spontaneous appearing. You will not find yourself there dutifully creating it. Which is actually kind of an absurd thing to think about, because in order to create it, you have to have the thought of it. So in the moment you attempt to create it, it's already here. Which means you're not creating thoughts. You are not creating your thoughts. You are not responsible for them. They are simply arising because of the nature of the universe itself. Nisargadatta was asked once about why are things like this? And he says, you are the way you are because the universe is the way it is. Just this complete equanimity in him. This is just the way it is. Why is all this happening? Because this is the way the universe is. Now, what happens if I drop my disagreement with it? Now, admittedly, that's not easy, right? What do you do with all the stupidity, the brutality, the arrogance, the manipulation, the conquest, the greed, the inequality? What do you do with all of that? Do I just say yes to it? Well, yes. You just say yes to it. That doesn't mean you say, oh, okay, I guess it's all great then. It's all okay, right? Because you can't. That would be disingenuous. It's not really true. But to be willing to sit in that place that says, this is totally unacceptable, and I have to accept it. Can you see the dynamic that creates inside of you? That point at which you have to accept the unacceptable and reckon it is unacceptable, and at the same time I have to say yes to it, creates an inner tension that is the real foundation, the real vestibule, the catalyst for awakening. Being willing to sit in the middle of unacceptable pairs, complete opposites, without taking sides, without preferring one over the other, is the place of wisdom. That is the place where truth can emerge. So I will leave it at that, and move my hand here, take a sip of my tea. I always look forward to making my tea for satsang. So let me say hello to Rosario in Madrid. Roberto is in Barcelona today. Hello, Ursula in Portugal, Ava in Poland, Sally in Southeast England. Running out of options? Hello from Yakima, Washington. Indeed we are. Sally has a question. Hi, GP. Why is it so important to allow and feel difficult feelings? Is this spiritual practice, and do we benefit from it? Thanks. The reason it's important is because the resistance to difficult feelings is the cause of suffering. If there is no resistance to a difficult feeling, there's no suffering. And without resistance to it, you see it as it is. Remember, all of our suffering comes by a rejection of what is. And the reason we reject what's happening in our life, is because it has been interpreted from a particular point of view. We're not actually seeing it as it actually is. We are seeing it from a particular point of view that rejects it. And so the thing that's happening itself may in fact be quite good, but we reject it because we've been taught to interpret it from this particular position. This happens right from the get-go as children. That's why we reject most of our best parts, because it's not acceptable to the tribe. And then what we do is we say, well, that's a bad habit. I can't do that. I'm lazy. I start thinking of myself in those terms, when in fact I'm disinterested. The school system failed me. It isn't providing me anything, but now I'm labeled as having OCD or being lazy or easily distracted and put on Ritalin or something, right? This is what happens when in fact it's an interpretation of the nature of things itself, of the nature of the child, of the nature of life. Even the word difficult, right, says, I don't like this. I don't want to feel this. Now, the discipline of letting yourself feel what has been labeled as difficult yields a couple of things. Number one, you discover that it really can't hurt you, that it is just a feeling, right? And that you are quite capable of sitting with it, even being peaceful with it. It also removes the distortion we have of the ideas we have about it, and we have the opportunity to experience it as it actually is. And it also opens the door to deep emotional healing, because those difficult or uncomfortable feelings are there as a result of wounds and traumas and stuff that has happened to us in the past. And they're kind of a buffer between that. So the more we're willing to be with those feelings, the more the truth of our story can come out, as well as the inner environment gets created that allows for the release of those wounds and those traumas. So we don't carry them around anymore. That self-sabotaging voice just goes quiet because it's not needed anymore. So in that sense, it is a very practical energy healing way of doing it. It also brings about a lot of spiritual growth, the capacity to be with that which is not pleasant, which is one of the signs of wisdom and is the essence of compassion. And it opens the door for us to be increasingly present, Because as you allow the feelings to be there, so much of the energy that has been suppressing them gets released. You find yourself much more expressive, calmer, more resourceful in terms of the way you live your life. And also, it becomes easier to step back even further to begin to see all of this activity as being the functioning of the system and not you. You become, when you take a position about it, say, this is difficult, I want to get rid of it, that's not you. That is a conditioned pattern that you've been identified with. But as I just allow more and more, what I'm doing is I'm allowing myself. I'm allowing self-acceptance. I'm not saying this part of me, this feeling is bad, it's got to go away, this feeling is good, I want more, but I'm just inviting the whole thing to the party. Because it's all part of me. And I open up to the possibility of embracing those parts of me that I've rejected because I misinterpreted them because of the identity position that I took. And that opens the door to seeing the depth, to a total disidentification with form. And that total disidentification with form is enlightenment. The I is no longer identified with the body, the mind, the forms, even with birth and death. The I becomes one with the whole. I am the universe. The thoughts are cosmic thoughts. It is the universe thinking. And I am the essence of it. The entire universe is your body at that point. That capacity to be with the difficult just explodes into compassion and love for all humanity, all life, everything that exists. So I would have to say that would make it pretty important. A simple practice like that. Very, very, very simple. So it is a spiritual practice. Right? You could make a distinction because you could practice this only from the motivation of wanting to become emotionally healthy and release traumatic material, or you could actually see it as an exploration of the truth of your being that has the nice side effect of healing traumatic material. So for me, it's all a spiritual practice, because I don't care what it is. Eventually it leads one to the question, well, who am I then? If this is nothing but conditioning, this is the way I've trained to be, well then who am I? Now you're standing on holy ground. How's that, Sally? Is that good? Is that good? There's David and Elaine, also from Southeast England. Robbie in Romania. Merck in Sweden. Anna Martins. Hello, Anna. Greetings to you. There's Playan, also from Sweden. Sean, happy Father's Day. Thank you. I hope to make it to your retreat this weekend, right? Oh, yeah, that's right. Thank you for... I hope you do, too. It'll be 3 days. It'll all be recorded. So let me put this up there really quick. It is a live retreat I'm doing, not in person yet. Next year it will be in person. I'm doing it for the Krishnamurti Education Center of Canada. It's really kind of a fundraiser for them. I do get a little bit of it for me to cover expenses and the like, but it really is to help keep this center going, which is doing its best to keep messages like this out and to keep alive the work of J. Krishnamurti, who is one of the greatest spiritual teachers of all time. So we'll take that down now. So it's very simple, gpwalsh.com/KECC. And it's cheap, too. It's $100 Canadian, which is like, I don't know, 85 US, 70 pounds in euros. I mean, it's like nothing for 3 days. A couple hours each one of those mornings. So I hope many of you will join me there. So let's see, what do we got here? Yep, come on. This thing bumps around on me. Let's see, there's Carl in sunny Ireland. There's Ava. What a coincidence. A few days ago, I thought about breathing. I do not make it, although it feels like that. Breathing is going on by itself, because if I did make it, I would be able to stop it. Correct. You would be. And when you really think about it, it's really good that the egoic mind doesn't have control over the body functions. None of us would last to noon. It's a cosmic event. We think of it so personally, but the body is a cosmic event. This is the functioning of life, which is completely interdependent with all life. Right? I breathe in oxygen, I breathe out carbon dioxide. The tree across the way from me is breathing in that same carbon and breathing out oxygen. So is this one body, two body, 10 bodies? It's one stupendous functioning. And at the heart of it is the awareness of it. The universe is simply God's self-image, which is you. See, I would be able to stop it. Yeah, no, you can't. You can't stop it. Abhiyuday, oh boy, in India. Hello, I can't pronounce your name. Let's see. Abhiyuday. Anyway, hello to you. There's Marty in Vancouver, Washington. Carl, hi GP. Could I ask your opinion on Ascension, the light body, new earth, and raising your vibration? Is this a necessary part of the spiritual journey, or is the 5D just another conditioned environment? I lost interest in this through your teachings, yet part of me misses the interaction with all that stuff, which feels missing when it comes to the I am. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff out there. On the positive side, it represents the human mind beginning to shed some of the old patterns and restrictions, the really narrow, fundamentalist kind of ideas that have kept us bound and superstitious for so long. But I think the pendulum swung in the direction that much of it is quite ludicrous, right? The fact of the matter is we cannot perceive 5D. So somebody talking about 5D, it has to be imagination. We cannot perceive it. It is outside the realm. So it's pure speculation. And we're not talking about mathematicians making mathematical models, right? Or, a four-dimensional object expressed in three-dimensional space. It's not that. It's just people who want to believe in something, but they don't have anything to believe anymore, right? The old God is gone. The old structures are gone. And it's true. The society is collapsing, right? It's not a point in the future. It's already happening. We are in the middle of the collapse. And so where do you go? Where do you go to find a reference point? And so we make a lot of stuff, a whole lot of stuff up. At the root, what you see is the mind trying to find a reference point. Some place where it can stick a stake in the ground, because as you realize, the mind, you can't solve an equation that doesn't have at least one constant in it, right? Something has to be a reference point around which the mind can build a structure of belief and therefore a sense of reality. Right? That used to, religion used to do that. That was it. The cultural norm, there was the cultural story, and that's what did it. That was the center, and everybody thought that way. Well, that's all fallen apart. Right? That doesn't exist anymore. And yet the mind needs that. On an individual level, that's what the identity is. The sense of identity is the I, right? This is what I am. Okay, boom. That's my point of reference. Now, all the other thoughts can gather around that and support it and enhance it and do all sorts of things with it. Because you recognize the mind cannot function without a point of reference. Right? If it doesn't have one, it'll make one up. That's the nature of the storyteller mind. The nature of our mind, if it does not have that, it will invent one and believe it to be true in an instant, because it cannot exist without it. Now, in this teaching, in non-dual teaching, what we're doing is we're the courageous work of breaking all of those reference points down, deconstructing them to see that they are nothing but fabrications of the mind. They aren't true. The mind believes them to be true, organizes itself around it, and it may serve for a while, function. If you get enough people together around, organize this in the same way, you get a community. You get enough of them, you get a culture, right? And that culture can sustain itself for a period of time. But eventually, that story, because it is a story and it is inherently unstable, it is going to collapse. In the individual human being, the name of that story is the ego, the sense of self. This is who I am. Good. Oh, I know who I am, so I can organize that. Now, what do we do in non-dual teaching? We completely deconstruct that. And it seems, from the point of view of the mind, it seems as if I've taken all that away and I've given you nothing in return. I've given you nothing finite, unstable, or transient in return. What I've given you is the self that is stable, but it is not a thing. It is not a person. It is not a thought. It is not a construct. It is reality itself. But that reality itself is not a tangible, knowable thing that the mind can begin to organize around. And so the end result is the mind has to be kind of brought into a quiescence, where it is willing to be with that absence of a self. That is, absence of an egoic self, long enough for it to begin to reorganize itself around the truth of being. And this is why the mind is forever trying to create a new self. You'll notice it. You'll get some kind of idea, and before you know it, the mind has already commandeered it, trying to create a new version of you. Now I'm like this, now I'm the yoga dude. Now I'm spiritual guy, Now I'm Wall Street broker. We've gone through that in our lives. Right? Because this is the way the mind works. It has to have a reference point. Well, the reference point that in non-duality isn't in the mind. The mind cannot create the truth. It can only create a reference point, which will be relative to some other reference point. Hence, it's inherently unstable. And so this is what all of these kind of things are doing. Guardian angels, 5D, ascended masters, channeling, all of those things. Now, on one hand, they represent an opening of the mind to other dimensions, and by other dimensions I mean other levels of experience that are outside of our normal kind of little world that we created for ourselves. But they are still projections of the mind on that. So you have the mind breaking down, constantly trying to find a new place to put the stake in the ground. Now remember, these experiences are not faults. They're not hallucinations. They are illusions, which is different. An illusion is a misinterpretation of something that actually is happening. Right? So yes, people will have an extraordinary experience, and then they'll invent a theory like 5D to try to explain it. That 5D explanation is coming out of the old mind pattern. The experience itself wasn't in the mind pattern. But it get commandeered, right? And oh yeah, that was 5D, or I met a guardian angel, or something like that. In this path, you go direct to the experience itself and allow the experience to reveal its nature to you, which you end up finding all the time is simply, you are experiencing the nature of existence itself. You are experiencing yourself. That the true nature of all of those things is not an other, it is you. What you call 5D is in fact an experience of an aspect of you you didn't know you had. So it's not 5D at all. And the true self is 0D. It is dimensionless. It is beyond space and time. So hopefully that explains it for you, Carl. Oh, you're missing interaction with that. It is important for us to have community. As human beings, we need the kind of companion. And yes, these kinds of things are incredibly engaging. Right? But I've had some experiences. I've done some interviews on shows where people where this was kind of the ilk of it. This is kind of the ascended masters and 5D and I'm willing to be a guest on these shows. They assume that I agree with it, right? But when I started throwing out little bits and pieces, and I wasn't aggressive, wasn't trying to tell you're all full of shit. I was just pointing out the possibility for how we can, the need to seek the truth more than a comfortable theory. And I didn't even put it in those terms. Incredibly gentle, and there was irritation there. They did not like being invited to question. Right? So, in a particular sense, that evangelical fundamentalist aspect of the ego can pop up anywhere. Right? Fundamentalist vegans. Right? You experience it all the time. That despotic tendency of the egoic mind can pop up. Could pop up anywhere, because once it has created an identity around it, it doesn't want it to be questioned. Right? And so you can find these things interesting, but at the same time you have to recognize that they're not the truth. Right? They're an approximation at best. They're a temporary thing along the path. And what it means is that the mind is still trying to find something to satisfy it. And it's insatiable. It's a hungry ghost. Right? It's whispering very quietly in your ear, yeah, but this whole, just being the infinite self, that's not very interesting. You go to this empty place, it's boring. The mind is addicted to entertainment, and even its spiritual pursuits. Be it church, right? Going to a tent meeting, or some new age thing, or going out to visit a vortex. It's entertainment. The mind wants to be fed something, and we're actually in the business of dismantling the mind so completely that it ceases to exist. It becomes one with the self, and which means there is no mind as an entity in and of itself. There is only the self. And what we call thinking is actually just evanescent ripples in the infinite, limitless ocean of the self. How's that, my friend? Hello, Lisa. Good to see you. Sally, wonderful GP, thank you. Listening to this through a cracking thunderstorm. Beautiful. Well, look at this. Not many questions. Not many questions. There's at the bottom of the list already, so maybe a short day. Barbara, hello from Sweden. Hello to you. Here they come. Roseanne, how can you know whether to act out on certain thoughts? Thank you, GP. Yeah, this is interesting, very interesting. Because if I was the kind of teacher that would give you a checklist, say, okay, look for this, 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 and this, and if you get this, this, and this, then everything's going to be okay. I would be keeping you a child. Right? I don't want to tell you how to do it. I want to help you grow into the kind of person that feels confident to take an action even when you don't know. Because sometimes the truth is, you don't know. Let me make sure you don't know whether you should act on a certain thought or not until you do. That's what the wisdom of experience is all about. Now, notice, there's a part of all of us that it wants to be safe, and so we want the sure thing, right? It's an immature part of all of us, right? The part that just always wants to ask mommy or daddy, is it okay? And almost all of us have been taught to defer to external authorities. You don't take it on your own authority. You have to ask an expert, quote unquote, right? So how do you know whether to act on a thought or not? It's a cultivated sense of intuition and recognition. A quality, I call it discrimination or discernment, right? And again, oftentimes it's just from the experience of having done it and seeing the fruit of it that you realize that thought will have a kind of vibe about it, a particular flavor. And you go, something's not quite right here. Now, at the same time, that other sense that is, I really want to know, should I do it, should I not do it, vacillating back and forth, right, is the classic struggle in every human being for every decision we ever make between safety and freedom. Safety wants to know that the road is absolutely clear, it won't be any problem, it's always going to work exactly the way I want it to work. Right? Then it will say yes. If there's any doubt, the safety mechanism would rather forego any kind of benefit than to risk the possibility of danger. Right? Your safety mechanism has no problem whatsoever being miserably unhappy where it is as long as it's safe. You have to recognize that energy is in every human being. That it doesn't care about happiness, it doesn't care about wealth, it doesn't care about fun, it doesn't care about intimacy, it only cares about safety. And when that is overactive, it is forever judging every single thought, because every single thought that leads to a change is going to be a threat to it. So that part of us has to become more malleable, more willing to play, more willing to participate in the process. And this is what inner reconciliation is all about. Because on the other side, you've got the desire for freedom. Right? And that desire for freedom is, I teach them so that you understand that they're two very different functions, like your lungs and your stomach. Your lungs can't process food, your stomach can't deal with air. Right? They have two very different things. And if they're at odds with each other, the entire organism is in trouble. But if they're harmonizing together, right, they're working together with all the other guys, you have a healthy system. Right? So freedom doesn't care about safety. It's more than willing to jump off the side of a building just to have that experience of that thrill of that last 9 seconds of life. More than happy to do that. It has no sense of safety. It is foolhardy by nature. Right? This is the little kid in us, right? That just chases the ball into the street, reaches for the shiny object. No sense of consequence. Right? Now, obviously, if one side or the other is dominant, life is completely out of balance. Right? It's either really fun but doesn't last very long, or it lasts a long time and it's no fun at all. How do you make this happen? Right? And so, when you ask that, how do I know whether to act on something or not? That is the dynamic that's actually happening. The one part of you is saying, God, this is really great. This could make a big difference. This would be really fun. The other part is saying, too much change, too much risk, not going to do it. How do you bring those two guys together? Right? How do you reconcile those opposing energies, so that you may not know what the right thing, the quote unquote right thing is to do, but there'll be a sense of confidence and courage that allows you to take steps, because you know every step you take, the world is going to look different, and you have a complete freedom to course correct at any given time. And you have this incredibly powerful mechanism that can spot danger a mile away. And if you are in right relationship with that, it won't sabotage you. It will actually work with you. This is the nature of the human system. And at that fundamental level, there's other parts to it, of course, and the need for creativity, self-expression, visionary, and that sort of thing. But in its essence, the central conflict in the human being is between safety and freedom. And so when you are struggling over a thought, recognize that that's what's going on. And at that point, you simply step back into the position that I call the peacemaker. Right, that says, okay, one part of me wants this part of me doesn't want this. I'm not going to take sides. I'm not going to try to force it to happen, but I'm not going to let go of it either. I'm not just going to acquiesce and say, okay, we'll just do it the way we do it. We'll just take the status quo route. You don't. You stay in the middle. And it becomes kind of an inner negotiation. Yes, I know I have to be safe, but I do want this. I'm not letting go of it. So somebody, you guys, figure it out, please. This is the process I call inner reconciliation. And it's quite elaborate. I've got 3 levels of it. And for the home study, I do coach training in it and the like. Haven't done it in a while, but I'm going to again. I'm building up to recreating that school. So does that answer it for you? Roseanne? I know it's not a nice... it'd be really nice. You could sign up, $97. You get the nice checklist. Check. Okay, do it. But that really robs you of the depth of experience, the depth of inner power that you actually have access to. Line Bertson. Line or Line? Hello from Norway. Hello to you. I think you're new. Patricia in the City of Angels. So good to see you. So good to see you. Grace. Exactly. Not sure what you're coming on, Grace, but thank you. Peter. Hello from Italy again. I'm late. Peace. Thank you in advance for whatever comes out. This beautiful satsang. You're welcome. Ava. Thank you for your answer to Carl Lucy. Although my problem was not about 5D, but it would take too much time to explain here. And thank you, Carl, for your question. Thank you so much, GP. 0D. In an interview, you mentioned finding yourself and abiding there is different than the abide in me that I learned through the Bible, abide in myself. If the me in the Bible that you're referring to, and I know the passages you're talking about, if you see that as a super being out there somewhere, then no, I'm not talking about the same thing. But in my estimation, that isn't what the Bible is actually talking about. Well, it is sometimes, it isn't other times. It's kind of a mixed up book. But the abide in me means abiding in the self. It is the same thing. God is a word for the self, right? It has been misinterpreted. It has been enculturated. It has been put to alternative uses. The egoic mind, which always makes a self and an other, has invented the idea of a super other, the ultimate other, the untouchable other, with which I must have some kind of a formal legalistic relationship. So you can't abide in that. Usually what that means is abiding in the law. I'm abiding, a law-abiding citizen. I am doing what I'm supposed to do. But when someone like Christ talked about abiding in me, he was saying, I and my Father are one, the kingdom of heaven is within you. He who drinks of my mouth shall become as I am, and I shall be he. He's talking about a very different me to abide in. This is the me that is the truth of you. But the thought is still active that I am something else other than the truth, attempting to find the truth, which is not true. You are the self right now. That which is hearing my words right now is the infinite being. It is the infinite consciousness. There cannot be many consciousnesses. Right? It is boundless. It is singular. There's one conscience in which all of this is appearing. And so, abiding there simply means I am constantly bringing my attention back to that fact, to that truth, to the God within, to the kingdom of heaven within, with the truth of being, which is simply consciousness. And I am conscious. It's pretty self-evident. I keep bringing attention back. And when you're doing that, you'll notice how habitually, reflexively, that impulse to identify with forms and become engaged in the world. And by engaged in the world, I don't mean, I'm not saying you go off to a mountain somewhere and sit in a cave. What I'm saying is that there's a sense of identity that arises that we agree with unwittingly, which thus forms a relationship with the world, and now I am engaged with the world as a person, which means I'm not even seeing the world as it is. I'm seeing it through the eyes of the person that I'm not. And so this is a process of taking that sense of I and removing it from that, disidentifying with anything, with form, with thought, with belief, with the body, and bringing attention constantly back to the sense of I am, that undeniable sense of my own existence, which is effortless. You didn't create it, obviously. You just are. And the willingness to be there, and little by little, all lesser interests fall away until it becomes quite one-pointed, and you just stay there. You can't make the ultimate awakening happen. You can't make Buddhahood be. You can't bring it about. It isn't the result of a process. You are simply abiding in your highest understanding with the open heart, knowing intuitively that this is what I am. Does that answer it for you? Input. Hey Dale, good to see you. Ian, hi GP. I have a huge wall of text to post soon. Tons of update. Okay, good. Is there easy for me to ask a question? More than 200 characters? My questions are basically an essay. Well, in this format, it doesn't really lend itself to that. Partially because just of the limit of what you can put in here, and partially because it is interactive. I can't go through an essay to pick out the question. So in this format, distill it down to the most important question. If you can find the linchpin upon which the entire thing rests, bring me that one. Otherwise, sign up for the retreat where we'll have more time and we can actually interact face-to-face on Zoom, which would make it which would be a completely different dynamic. Now we don't have to rely on written words. We can actually make it much more energetic. So, how's that? Excellent. Used to seem like the most selfish thing I could do. Now it seems selfish not to. You're referring back to abiding in yourself. Yes. Yeah, a way. Yeah, the idea of taking care of myself is selfish. It's really quite a strange. We live in a very strange culture where things like that are regarded as selfish. And at the same time, it's always the self-made man or woman, me first. It's just typical, the typical insane irrationality of the egoic mind. The best thing you can do for yourself and for the world is to realize who you are. When you realize who you are, you realize who everybody else is. End of story. You immediately become a healing influence in every single life. You make it easier for everybody else. Okay. Oh boy, okay. I've had temporary awakenings, last 5 minutes, couple hours. Okay, I'm just going to have to scan this. Yeah, and much as I would love to go into it, I can't read this whole thing. So let me scroll down the bottom. See, I wrote an entire story. I'll try to condense. Kind of late. I started posting. Too late. All right. Yes. Thank you. Do try to condense it. Otherwise, I'll kind of skim through and see what I can find. But see if you can condense it first. Thank you. Grande 7777. Same to you. Guys, buy his Inner Reconciliation course 1, 2, and 3. It's amazing. Thank you, Dale. Roseanne says, beautiful. Yes, it helps. Thank you. You're welcome. Crispin, in my constant attempt to accept and allow everything, I feel an unpleasantness, some sort of disassociation. Could this be the result of wanting to be the witness? Well, okay, don't turn trying to accept and allow into some kind of practice that's going to yield something in the future. The capacity to accept and allow is the payoff. That's the reward. Right? It isn't a stepping stone to something else. Right? It is a reestablishment of your relationship with life. You are now going to engage with life on a completely different level. So you're retraining yourself to be a harmonious human being. Right? Now, in the process of doing that, we've got all sorts of old habits in life. Resistance has been trained into us from the get-go. And any time you take a position, anytime you identify with anything, you have put yourself into a position which then colors everything that you experience. This practice of simply allowing and accepting, the whole point is to step outside of those positions, to see that they're just positions. It's just a perception. It's not the truth, right? And thus have a completely different relationship with the experiencer of life. When you start putting pressure on yourself, and it's like something I'm going to master, I've got to do this, right? I'm going to be a competition and win the competition or something. It can start to become burdensome, right? If it starts to become burdensome, you can bet your bottom dollar that the ego is there trying to get something out of it. It has now turned into something to get, right? To define myself now as the accepting and allowing person. Accepting and allowing isn't a person. You accept and allow even those ripples of consciousness that make up what we call the person. We're learning how to be with life on its terms, which is outside of the egoic mind. The egoic mind will find it to be unpleasant. It will say, oh, you're just disassociating. Well, you can feel the difference, right? Disassociation feels different because it's an attempt to avoid. Underneath, you can still feel you don't like it, right? Right? Okay, so now there's a sense of disassociation. Let that be there. Okay, yes, okay, this is one of the things the nervous system does when it feels threatened, when it can't deal with something, it wants to disassociate. Okay, so I'm watching that too. I can clearly see it. It's appearing in consciousness. There it is. Okay. So I'm not going to make a big deal out of that either. This is one of the things that happens. It doesn't happen all the time. It's transient, so it's not the truth. It comes and goes. Right? And so that any feeling of unpleasantness or any feeling of discomfort, you notice those. You let it come, and it will eventually go. Put no story on anything that comes up. This is what happens. Something comes up, and then we start going, that means I must not be allowing enough, right? What if you just put all the story aside and just whatever comes up, and it has no meaning whatsoever. No meaning whatsoever. It's just a happening, a cosmic event. You didn't do it. You don't have to do anything with it. It'll come up. It'll do its dance for as long as it lasts, and then it will disappear again. Okay? If I create a story about it, like it should be here, it shouldn't be here, this means something about me, right? I have projected on that characteristics that it doesn't actually possess, and now I have extended its life. I'm keeping it around now through my story. My story is recreating it. Just step back and go, oh, whatever comes up is just coming up. There's a story of a young woman who had a spontaneous awakening, a spontaneous enlightenment, and it shook her. She didn't really know what happened. She eventually figured out and learned what had happened. It was one of those things that was not planned. Right? She didn't have any teachers of that. But after it had happened, she got interested and she started looking into it. And she said she had this anxiety, this fear in her that went on for 12 years. Right? And that she couldn't shake. And at the same time, she's awake. She's an enlightened being, feeling nothing but fear in her body. She finally ran across Zen and met a Zen master. And she told her the whole story about it. And he said to her, when fear is present, it means fear is present, nothing more. Wham! The whole thing just broke for her. She had attached to the arising of fear a meaning that somehow something was off. She didn't get it. It wasn't right yet. And this persisted for 12 years, right? And in that moment she realized that it meant nothing, that everything she had thought about, that the meaning that it had, it didn't. It had no meaning at all. She was giving it, she was perpetuating the anxiety. And in fact, in that moment, it was gone. Because the feeling itself has no meaning. It has no past. It has no future. It is just it's like a bubble in the ocean. There's no future for that bubble. Hits the surface, boom, gone. Right? It's nirvana. It's extinction. Okay? So this is such an important lesson for everyone to recognize. I know in energy healing and in psychotherapy and the like, there's some analysis of what's going on, and sometimes that's useful. Right? But at the depth of it, every feeling that comes up is just a feeling coming up, and it has no meaning whatsoever. If I give it meaning, that is the ego telling a story about it, taking possession of it, and suffering as a consequence. Are you following this? It's a very powerful thing to grasp. Right? Nothing has inherent meaning. If it did, everybody's experience of whatever that thing was would be the same. because the meaning would be in the thing. But the experience everyone has is different, which means it's not in the thing, it's in me. The thing itself, neutral, empty, no self, no truth. It is all you. So every thought that comes up, just think, just notice, a thought has come up. And so I say, oh, this is this is a real problem. You go, that's just another thought. It's only a problem if I say it's a problem. There is no such thing as a problem. The mind invents them. It calls life a problem. There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. That's Shakespeare. Leave it at that. How's that, Crispin? There's Grande, my emoji buddy. Let's see. Let me see if very fitting story actually. Let's see. Let's see if I'm skipping over something. I have to skip around. During these pain body attacks, I try to remind myself I'm just a perceiver perceiving. I'd like to know why it's called non-dual. Isn't there still an I? It's just that the I is pure non-phenomenal perceiving. Why it's very hard to disidentify with them. Kind of late, intense. I wrote a short version. Lots of awakening, still miserable. Pain bodies everywhere. Old trauma in my body constantly, and it's very hard to disidentify with them. I do hope you're in the retreat, Ian, that I'm doing. I'll put the link up again later. I do hope, because these are the kind of things. These are the kind of things where I can guide you. If I'm with you personally, I can guide you, right? So that you can see it. It's a whole lot easier. But let me see if I can speak to it now. So, lots of awakenings, okay. Which means that you've had glimpses of your true being, glimpses of existence outside of the egoic mind, maybe even of pure consciousness or pure awareness. Right? It then gets covered up again, right? The old thoughts, the old patterns, the old energy resurfaces, and we think I've lost it. Right? And then what happens is if you've had a glimpse, those experiences that before may have been uncomfortable become even more painful, because you now are comparing your current experience with that moment where you were completely free. And of course, there's no comparison, right? But because our spiritual seeing is still immature, right? All this other stuff coming up, old wounds and patterns and habits and thoughts and beliefs and all sorts of things rising up to the surface, right, become an enemy. It's like you are in the way of me seeing who I really am. You are a huge problem now. You are very, very painful. I have to get rid of you, right? Now notice, in that kind of language towards it, you're treating it as if it were an actual entity with a will of its own trying to mess you up. It isn't. It is a robot. It is a pattern of behaviors. It is conditioned patterns of thoughts, emotions, and sensations. That's all it is. Now, for most of your life, you were identified with it. Those conditioned patterns of thoughts, emotions, and sensations were not conditioned patterns. They were me. When I use the word I, that's what it was. And I never even questioned the idea that I wasn't that it was just conditioning and not me. In the moments of awakening, that's what happens. It's like, it's not me, right? But that habit energy is so strong, it's gone on for millions of lifetimes, right? That it's right back. In fact, that is the energy that creates lifetime after lifetime. Without that, birth and death cease to be. It is just pure infinite being. So now you're in the process of allowing the insight, the awakening to move south into the body, to begin to become an awakening of the heart and the emotions, and not just in the mind, not just in our insight. So let's start with just that word right there, the phrase. It's very hard to disidentify with them. You believe that, right? Because they feel very powerful, right? But they feel powerful because you believe it, not because they're actually true. It's very hard to disidentify with it. Because you believe it is hard to disidentify with them, you experience it as being hard. But in fact, it's not hard. Your natural state is not identified with the body-mind. The identification is part of the body-mind. But believing it, you believe it into existence. You create the conflict. Otherwise, it's just the functioning of life. And this particular life form, this body-mind complex, is in this particular form because of the environments that it has been in. Nothing more. And so the arising of that stuff, like the woman with the arising of fear, it has no meaning unless you say it does. And then you suffer not from what's being experienced, but from the meaning you have given it. Therein lies the freedom. At that point, it doesn't matter what the body feels like. It doesn't matter what it does. You are free. As long as you think it should be doing something else, or that it means something that, I don't really get it because the body, if I did, the body would be, my mind would be doing all of this stuff. Nonsense. It's not true. That's the meaning that you gave it, which cuts yourself off from the fruit of your own realization. You cut it off. Can you see how subtle it is? Right? You say, I am miserable. Okay, who is miserable? When you say, I am miserable, you're referring to a certain bunch of feelings and thoughts that you're having. Right? Now, those feelings, the presence of those particular thoughts and feelings, right, mean nothing unless you say, they make me miserable. I am miserable. Otherwise, I'm just experiencing thoughts, emotions, and sensations. Period. Nothing else. But then I say, I'm miserable. Why? Because there's a sense it should be different. Something else should be happening, right? Well, something else shouldn't be happening. How do I know that? Because something else isn't happening. This is. And whatever's happening is exactly what's supposed to be happening. But it has no meaning. Right? And so when you say it's hard to disidentify, you've made it difficult. It's just a thought, isn't it? It's a thought that says it's hard to disidentify. If you believe it, then you believe it into existence, and you will experience it as if it were true. Because you are the truth. Whatever you believe to be true is experienced as if it is true. In fact, the only truth is you. Would also like to know why it's called non-dual. Isn't there still an I? It's just that the I is pure non-phenomenal perceiving. Well, yeah, it's a matter of just the clumsiness of language. If there's only one I, then there's no such thing as I. If all is I, then the word I doesn't make any sense. Remember, language is always opposites. I as opposed to you, or as opposed to he, she, it, them, right? One as opposed to many. So when we say non-dual, it's trying to point to not to. That's what Advaita means, not to. It is not two, which is the closest expression you can get to. Because if you say one, the mind thinks of one numerically, one in terms of many, I in terms of other, right? And so I can call it the ultimate I, right? But in fact, the sense of I, even that sense I am, vanishes in the absolute, where there's not even an I. There are no opposites. There are no languages. It is pure being without a second. And in language, we are limited to the dualistic nature of language, the subject-object relationship with it. And so, yes, it is pure non-phenomenal perceiving that is perceiving itself, because that's all there is to perceive. And the resulting perception is what we call the universe. So it is not two. There's not a universe being perceived by the ultimate self. The universe is the self perceiving. The perceiver, the perceiving, and the perceived are all one. But notice, your mind cannot grasp that. It is intuitively felt. You sense the truth of it. And then you simply bring the sense I, with all of its identifications, all of its getting all mixed up with all sorts of other stuff. You're just kind of peeling off everything that isn't that, till there's just a pure sense of I. And then you recognize that even that pure sense of I is being recognized by something else. And that the I am then is the most fundamental vibration of the absolute self. And it's for that reason that Buddha would use the term no self. So that to try to find a different way in to get around that idea of an I. Because in the traditional Hindu, it was always the self. And Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta Maharaj, Muji, Krishnamurti, all refer to the self. Right? In Buddhism, they refer to no self, right? Pointing to exactly the same thing. There's no self in any of this. There's no meaning in any of this. There's no truth in any of this. There's no objective existence in any of this. There is no objective existence to your experience of misery. It is not an objective fact. It is a completely subjective dream. Let's see, what else I undo? Does that cover it for you for now? I do hope you're in the retreat. I'd love to dive into this more thoroughly. Let's see, got some others here. Let's see, Ian. Very fitting. Yes, no thought, no emotion. I can't afford the retreat. Sadly, otherwise would love to join. Well, there'll be some other things. Yeah. I got a lot of free stuff. I would love to interact with you, though. Let's see. Thank you so much, GP. That was perfect and exactly what's been going on. So is my best bet to just go into body awareness, observation, and love when I notice this happening and watch it run itself? Yes, you're becoming curious about your own nature, right? Now remember, there's a very subtle thing that creeps in that says, should I just go into my body awareness? The subtle thing that creeps in is, okay, I'm just going to go into the awareness and allow it now, and then it'll go away. That last part, and then it'll go away, is silent. It's like a silent influence, right? That you barely notice it's there. There's kind of this very quiet motivation that, okay, this is a practice I'm doing to get something, which of course means you're not really practicing. Practice is always right now, this moment. So when those things come up, right, yes, you're going to allow them, but you're going to move towards them. This isn't just tolerating them. We want to understand the whole inner environment that creates suffering. You'll notice how the mind has all sorts of stories about these feelings coming up, what it means about you. A reflection on, well, you didn't really have an awakening experience. You were close, but man, did you blow it. Oh, it'll be 5 more lifetimes for you. You can hear all of that stuff getting projected on the direct experience. This is a direct path. So notice that that's happening, and keep bringing the attention back to the actual experience itself, the actual sensations going on in your body. And you'll notice that the sensations themselves, they don't announce themselves as I'm misery, I'm horrible, I'm discomfort, I'm making your life terrible. They don't say that. They are just an energy pattern. All the rest of that is mind's interpretation. Now what you're doing is you are separating out your direct experience from the story about it. And in that gap is where the freedom lies. Because once the story is gone, so is the suffering. Now it's just sensation, and it has no meaning whatsoever. It cannot cause anything. This is the art of it, the beautiful art of it, actually. So hopefully you will send an email to me, please, support@gpwalsh.com. See if I can rustle up a scholarship. I can do that periodically. It's different because I'm not putting it on. The Krishnamurti Education Center of Canada is. So I don't have the same leeway that I would in my own courses. But we should be able to figure something out here. Grande, we are not our feeling and experiences, it's thoughts. I want for everyone to become aware of whether it is yourself who creates. Lisa, hey G, sometimes I am so lazy and motivationless, but actually joyful and full of inner peace. After a 4-year process of transformation and realizing the truth, I wonder why there's sometimes this lethargy. Is it a problem? You know, you don't remember, but there was a time when you were a child, right? When you play with dolls or trucks or whatever it is you happen to play with. And then, after a while, they just weren't interesting anymore, right? You didn't make it that way. You didn't decide, I can't play with these anymore. It just happened, you know. It just happened very naturally. And in that time when this just isn't satisfying anymore, but something new hasn't happened on or shown up on the horizon, there can be this kind of sense of just kind of being lost, being lethargic, right? Nothing is engaging, right? So just chalk it up. It's not a problem, right? It's not a problem. It's just a feeling. So from that point of view, you could say, okay, it's not a problem. It's no big deal. This is what lethargy feels like. Okay, this is an experience of life. But notice, when you take the meaning off of it, it ceases to be an issue, doesn't it? There's an underlying sense here that somehow I shouldn't be lethargic. I should have all this motivation and the like. Do you still have motivation and enthusiasm for doing the inquiry, for bringing attention back to the self? Because even that could become, it can be turned into a burden. The ego is really good at creating burdens, and responsibilities and duties and stuff you got to do. It's totally into that, right? And yeah, eventually there's certain rebelliousness to say, oh God, I don't want to do that. Right? But anything that's bringing you joy and fun, you don't have to, there's no lethargy there, right? So always be willing to be engaged with life on its terms, to discovering new things that will float your boat. And also remembering that on the spiritual path, the spiritual path of realizing the truth, the realization of the truth is going to become more and more and more important, and it is going to, little by little, peel away all lesser interests. And as those interests are being peeled away, you're simply going to find there's no enthusiasm for them. And sometimes you'll find yourself in a position where there's no enthusiasm for anything, right? Now, in the normal way we are educated, that's a problem. Oh my God, you got to do something, right? That's our culture. That's the world we live in. Well, why? Right? It's just another feeling, just another sensation. Just be with it. Ah, there it is. I wonder what that came from. Ah. Notice that just opening this, giving this its space to be. And then you'll notice that, like every other feeling, comes, dances, goes. And has no inherent meaning. Feelings have no self. That no self is just such a beautiful teaching. No self in persons, no self in things, and no self in dharmas or teachings. There's not even my teaching. Right? It's not the absolute truth. It's a pointer to the truth. And you're the truth. You look to me for answers. I look at you as the answer. So just allow yourself to be, assume everything is okay, because it is. And be present with whatever comes up, and just notice how the mind says, well, if you're really transformed, if you're really awake, this wouldn't be coming up. Well, obviously not true. You are transformed, you are awake, and it did come up. Therefore, that statement is not true. But it wants to attach meaning to it to keep you as a person. Because as long as there's still something missing, I've got to get somewhere, I've got to learn something, I'm still the person. And the ego doesn't care what kind of person it is, as long as it's got a person. When in fact, that there is no person. You are simply the conscious awareness. And this happens to be what's arising in your awareness. It's like all of the conditions that are going on in the world, in the huge polarity of it, right, is all simply what's arising in consciousness. Say yes to it. Oh, okay, there it is. And I can say yes to it because it isn't me. It's just what happens to be arising. It is not the self. It's what's appearing to the self. And the self is simply the consciousness in which it is happening. And like the clouds in the sky, even a severe storm in the sky, it doesn't affect the sky. It doesn't even leave a trace. So, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I catch myself during these attacks and try to distance myself as the perceiver. Even when I see through thoughts and I know that me, I can't do anything but watch, which is better than fighting it. Yes. Yes, and it's okay, right? Don't put this burden on you. I've got to do this perfectly. It is simply the heartfelt desire to attempt to sit with compassion in the midst of whatever happens to be going on. It's all you need, right? That's all you need. You know, as they say, take one step towards God, He'll take 10 towards you. Not two sounds better than non-dual. Yes, that's what non-dual means, not two, right? And yes, it is closer, yeah. I just found Muji this week and love him. As do I. He is my teacher. Lindsay, this is making my cry my eyes out. Best thing I've ever heard. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. The truth is the best thing anybody can hear or say. The truth of you is you are already free. You keep thinking you're not, so you experience it as if it were true. All the conditions. And then we try to manipulate the conditions to bring about freedom, which is impossible because underneath there's simply this belief, I'm not free. And that's based on the sense of who you think you are. And so you have an image in your mind of someone who is not free, identified with it, and think, that's me. It's not you. When Christ said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free, the only way the truth can set you free is that you are already free. The truth can't make something different. It simply reveals what already is. You are the self. You always have been. It's simply a case of mistaken identity, believing the thought in the mind of me, right, is really me. And it's not. The very consciousness that is hearing my words right this minute is God. That which the images of the eyes are registering, that point of cognition, is what we call God. That is reality. That is the truth. That is pure awareness. That is the self. That is the no self. That is emptiness. That is shunyata. That is Buddha nature. That's you. The street name for it is me. The truth of the matter is, every time you use the word I or me, you're actually referring to the infinite self. But there's a thought that says, I'm the person. And the thought, it's like a thumb can block out the sun. It doesn't change the fact that you aren't the person. It doesn't change the fact that you are the self. And it's because of the power of the self that you manifest the universe in which you experience yourself as if you're not. That's how powerful you are. You've literally created a universe in which you are finite. In fact, but you're not finite. It's only a dream. You're dreaming yourself to be a finite being. Right? But the one dreaming is not a finite being. Never was. You are the self. You always have been. You always will be. That cannot be changed. So glad I found you. We can get in touch soon. Yeah, me too. Yeah. There's more emojis from Grande, my emoji lover. Lisa, I did bring my attention back to the self all Sunday long, laying around, but that wasn't a burden. It was enjoying doing nothing. Thanks, G. You're welcome. Yes, it's not a burden. In fact, it's the only practice Nisargadatta ever recommended was simply putting the attention on the I am. That was it. And you notice it's hard to do because the I am is not a thing. It's not a concept. It's not an idea. It's a sense of being, and it's very real. It's very visceral. But because it is so still, because it is so effortless, you don't need to do anything, right? The mind rejects it. The mind wants to hop off somewhere else. And that's the whole practice, is bringing the attention back to the self. That is the only spiritual practice necessary. Just bring the attention back there. It is, that's the nature of, nature of meditation. Right? And well, the self-inquiry, I mean, it all wraps together because this is not myself. Okay, so if anything I'm perceiving is not me, which is the inquiry, then what is me? And I turn now from what I'm experiencing, attempting to focus my attention on the me that's actually having an experience. At that point, I find I cannot do that because attention needs an object to look at, and there's no object there. It is what is perceiving, and you can't perceive yourself. You cannot stand aloof from yourself and look back. There is no subject-object relationship with yourself. So the knowing of myself is not the result of any kind of human knowledge. That's why it's non-dual, non-phenomenal recognition. It's the intuitively obvious fact that I am, but without any kind of subject-object explanation of it. You simply know that you are. How do you know? Become curious about that. That sense of being. And just keep going deeper and deeper into it. To even the sense of being is something that's perceived. And now you just stand as the ultimate perceiver, Buddha, the One, the Absolute, the true you, the only you. Alessandra, so beautiful. I would like to get the seminar for that person that has no money. I love you, Alessandra. Ah, so wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So, Ian, somebody has just offered to pay your tuition. As I said, I always have many, many people in my classes for free. I have no control over this because it's the Krishnamurti Education Center, and they're charging very, very little. It's all nonprofit. They survive on that kind of stuff. So very reasonable. So I'll put the two of you together. You don't have to discuss it here. I'll get the two of you guys together. May I recommend some channels? Sat Yoga Institute and Muji. Well, I don't know the Sat Yoga Institute, but obviously Muji is my teacher, so I highly recommend any interaction with Muji. He's a living Buddha. He is a living Buddha. There is one walking the earth right now. The experience can tell nothing about me. Yes, the experience has no meaning. Isn't that something? Every experience, the mind immediately interprets it. It's the nature of. That's how I teach the mind and the chakras. The storyteller mind. It's forever creating a narrative to overlay, to project upon circumstances. Circumstances have no meaning. They don't come with a story. The story is all projected on it. Circumstances are simply the flow of events. That's it. That's all it is, like the frames in a movie going by. The storyline is all here. And so it does tell you nothing about you. They have no meaning. Oh, so beautiful. So beautiful. Somebody said, Alessandra, somebody else, it was Ava, thank you, G. Oh, somebody else said something about you, Eon. Great name, by the way. Oh, I guess that's it. That's good. Everybody heard my message of needing to leave a little bit earlier so I can get ready to go spend the afternoon with my family, with my son and granddaughters and daughter-in-law. And my other son's, his birthday is on the 15th, so he kind of got screwed. Birthday and Father's Day coming together at the same time. Not fair. Not fair. Well, the other one's born around Christmas, so the 20th, so he got screwed too. So I did that to my kids. Anyway, thank you all for being here. Thank you for being willing to go into this kind of depth, to be willing to ponder these deep questions, and be willing to be with them long enough that they can really sink in, right? So that the serum gets injected and it can actually take root. So thanks everybody. Thank you. Happy Father's Day to all my fathers out there, and I will see you next week. Namaste.